The Velthari Dominion had ruled the Orion arm of the galaxy for 12,000 years. Their empire stretched across hundreds of star systems. Their warships were feared by every species that had ever encountered them. They had conquered 47 civilizations, crushed countless rebellions, and built their power on the bones of those who dared to resist. When their long-range sensors detected strange radio signals coming from a small blue planet orbiting an unremarkable yellow star, High Commander Zithos barely looked up from his throne. Another primitive species. Another world waiting to be claimed. The Velthari had a simple way of dealing with new civilizations. They sent a message offering two choices: surrender everything and become slaves, or face complete destruction. No species had ever chosen the second option. The mathematics were too clear. The Velthari fleet was too powerful. Resistance meant death. The message traveled across the void of space and reached Earth. Earth on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon in late September. Lieutenant Commander Grace Mitchell was working the night shift at the SETI, monitoring station in New Mexico, when her equipment picked up the signal. She was 34 years old, with tired eyes and hair that she had forgotten to brush that morning. She had spent 15 years listening to the silence of space, hoping to find proof that humanity was not alone. Now she had found it, and her hands were shaking. The signal was not random noise or a natural phenomenon. It was structured, intentional, and clearly artificial. Grace ran it through every translation program the station had. When the meaning became clear, she read it 5 times before she believed it. Surrender your world and your species to the Velthari Dominion. Your people will serve us. Your resources will belong to us. Your future will be determined by us. This is not a negotiation. This is your only warning. Resistance will result in the complete extinction of your kind. You have 30 of your planetary rotations to respond. Grace picked up her phone and called her supervisor. Within an hour, the message had been verified by 3 separate agencies. Within 6 hours, it had reached the President of the United States. Within 12 hours, every major government on Earth knew that humanity faced a choice that would determine its fate: the United Nations. Security Council held an emergency session. World leaders argued and debated and shouted at each other. Some wanted to surrender immediately, believing that slavery was better than extinction. Others wanted to fight even though they knew nothing about the enemy they faced. A few suggested ignoring the message entirely, hoping it was some kind of mistake or hoax. Admiral Kevin Torres listened to the arguments from his seat in the back of the chamber. He was 62 years old, a veteran of 3 wars, and he had spent his entire life preparing for battles that other people thought were impossible to win. He had gray hair, a face lined with experience, and eyes that had seen too much death to be afraid of it anymore. When the arguments finally died down, he stood up and walked to the podium. The room fell silent. "I have heard a lot of talk about survival," he said. "About making the smart choice. About accepting reality." He paused and looked around the room. "Let me tell you about reality. Reality is that we know nothing about these aliens except that they want to enslave us. Reality is that they have given us 30 days to decide our fate. Reality is that, if we surrender, we become property. Our children become property. Every generation that comes after us becomes property."
Nice.
He placed his hands on the podium and leaned forward. "I did not spend 40 years defending this planet so that I could hand it over to the first bully who came knocking. I did not watch good men and women die for freedom so that I could sell that freedom for the promise of survival." His voice grew harder. "They want our answer. I say we give them one. I say we tell them no. And if they come for us, we make them pay for every inch of ground they take." The vote was held 3 hours later. It was unanimous. Humanity's response was transmitted on every frequency the aliens had used. It was short and simple. "No, we will not surrender. We will not serve. Come and take our world if you can. 12,000 light years away." High Commander Zithos received the message in his command chamber. He was a tall creature, covered in scales that shifted color with his mood. Right now they were pale blue, indicating mild amusement. His subordinate Fleetmaster Rin stood beside him with a nervous expression. "They refused," Rin said. This is unprecedented. No species has ever refused. Zithos made a sound that might have been laughter. They are simply ignorant. They do not understand what they face. Show me what we know about them. Rin activated a display screen. Images of Earth appeared, along with data about human civilization. They call themselves humans. Their planet is mostly water. They have achieved basic space travel within their own system, but have no capability for interstellar flight. Their weapons are primitive by our standards. Chemical propellants, nuclear fission, simple projectiles. They have no energy shields, no plasma weapons, no faster-than-light technology. Their military strength? Laughable. They have never fought a war beyond their own atmosphere. Their largest vessels are small transport ships incapable of combat. We estimate that a single Velthari cruiser could defeat their entire combined fleet. Zithos studied the images for a long moment. He saw blue oceans and green continents and cities that sparkled with light. He saw a species that had no idea what was coming for them. Interesting, he said finally. They have courage, at least. Foolish courage, but courage nonetheless. He turned to Rin. Mobilize the Third Conquest Fleet. 200 warships should be more than sufficient. I want this world pacified within one planetary rotation of our arrival. Well, it seems excessive for such a primitive species, Rin observed. I want to make an example of them, Zithos replied. Other species are watching. Other species might get similar ideas about resistance. When we are finished with these humans, no one will ever refuse us again. The order went out across the Velthari communication network. 200 warships began their journey toward Earth, each one carrying enough firepower to destroy a continent. The crews were confident and relaxed. This would be an easy conquest, a simple mission, a footnote in the long history of Velthari, expansion. They did not know that they were sailing toward the most dangerous species the galaxy had ever produced. They did not know that humans had spent their entire existence fighting each other, perfecting the art of war, surviving against impossible odds. They did not know that the small blue planet they planned to conquer had produced warriors and scientists and survivors who would never, ever give up. The Velthari thought they were going to claim another world for their empire. They were wrong on Earth. Admiral Kevin Torres stood on the roof of the Pentagon and looked up at the stars. Somewhere out there, an enemy fleet was coming to destroy everything he had ever known. He had 30 days to prepare for a war that humanity could not possibly win. He smiled. He had faced impossible odds before. This time would be no different. Come and get us, he whispered to the darkness. We'll be waiting. The news spread across Earth like fire through dry grass. Governments tried to control the information at first, but secrets do not stay hidden in the modern world. Within 48 hours, every person on the planet knew that aliens existed, that they were hostile, and that they were coming. Some people panicked. There were riots in major cities, looting, violence born from fear. Religious groups declared the end times had arrived. Stock markets crashed. Governments struggled to maintain order, but something else happened too. Something the Velthari could never have predicted. Humanity began to unite. Old enemies set aside their differences. Countries that had been threatening each other for decades suddenly found common ground. Scientists from rival nations started sharing research. Military forces that had never worked together began planning joint operations. For the first time in human history, the species faced a threat that was bigger than any border, any ideology. Any ancient hatred. Admiral Kevin Torres was placed in command of the newly formed Earth Defense Coalition. He set up his headquarters in Geneva and began the impossible task of preparing a planet for war. His first order was simple: find out everything possible about the enemy. Grace. Mitchell was reassigned from SETA to the Intelligence Division. Her job was to analyze every piece of data from the alien message, searching for weaknesses, patterns, anything that could give humanity an advantage. She worked 18-hour days, surviving on coffee and determination. Dr. Samuel Green was a physicist at MIT who had spent his career studying theoretical faster-than-light travel. Most of his colleagues had considered his work to be science fiction. Now the government gave him unlimited funding and told him to make it real. He gathered the brightest minds on the planet and locked them in a laboratory with one instruction. Figure out how the aliens travel between stars, Sergeant. Lucy Palmer was a Marine who had served in combat zones across 3 continents. She was tough, experienced, and completely unafraid of death. When the call went out for soldiers to form the core of the new Terran Defense Force, she was the first to volunteer. Her job was to train ordinary men and women to fight an enemy they had never seen. Forget everything you think you know about war, she told her recruits on the first day. We don't know what these things look like. We don't know how they fight. We don't know anything except that they're coming to kill us. She paused and looked at the scared faces in front of her. But let me tell you something. Humans have been killing each other since we climbed down from the trees. We are very, very good at it. Whatever these aliens bring, they have never faced anything like us. Captain Daniel Cruz was an engineer who had spent 20 years building ships for deep space mining operations. Now he was given a new task: turn those mining ships into warships. He worked around the clock, welding weapons platforms onto cargo vessels, installing armor plating on transport ships, creating a fleet from whatever humanity had available. Lieutenant Amy Ross was a fighter pilot who had been grounded after a training accident damaged her knee. When the call came, she ignored her doctors and reported for duty. She was put in charge of developing combat tactics for space warfare, something no human had ever done before. Dr. Nathan Park was a weapons researcher who had spent his career developing systems that were too dangerous to use. Now those systems were exactly what humanity needed. He pulled classified projects out of storage and began adapting them for the coming war. 11 days after the alien message arrived, Dr. Samuel Green made a breakthrough. His team had been studying the communication frequencies used by the Velthari, and they discovered something remarkable. The signals contained patterns that suggested a form of compressed space travel, a way of folding the distance between 2 points. We can't build a full engine in time, Green told Admiral Torres during an emergency briefing. But we might be able to build something smaller, something that could intercept their communications, maybe even disrupt their systems. Torres nodded slowly. How long? 6 months to build a prototype. Maybe a year to make it reliable. You have 3 weeks. Green started to protest, then stopped. He looked at the faces around the table, all of them exhausted, all of them scared, all of them refusing to give up. 3 weeks, he agreed. The world transformed. Factories that had been making cars started producing weapons. Universities became research centers. Every resource, every skill, every ounce of human creativity was focused on a single goal: survival in orbit above Earth. The first human warship began to take shape. It was ugly, a converted mining platform covered in weapons and armor that had been designed in a matter of days. But it was armed, it was functional, and it represented something important. They called it the Defiance. Grace Mitchell stood on the observation deck of the orbital construction platform and watched the Defiance grow larger every day. She had not slept in 30 hours. Her eyes burned and her body ached, but she could not look away. "Do you think we have a chance?" asked a young technician who had come to stand beside her. Grace thought about the question for a long moment. She thought about the alien message, about the confidence in those words, about the thousands of years of conquest that had made the Velthari believe they were invincible. "I think they made a mistake," she said finally. "They think we're just another primitive species waiting to be conquered. They don't understand what we are. What are we?" Grace smiled, and there was something fierce in her expression. "We're survivors. We've survived ice ages, plagues, world wars, and our own stupidity. We've crawled out of every hole we've ever been pushed into, and we don't know how to quit." The Velthari fleet was still weeks away, crossing the vast emptiness between stars. High Commander Zithos spent his time reviewing conquest protocols and planning the administration of his newest acquisition. He imagined the glory that would come when he presented the conquered humans to the Dominion Senate. Another species broke in. Another world claimed he did not know that humanity was working day and night to prepare for his arrival. He did not know that scientists were unlocking the secrets of his own technology. He did not know that soldiers were training to fight in ways his species had never encountered. He did not know that Sergeant Lucy Palmer was teaching her troops to fight in zero gravity, to use the enemy's size against them, to never surrender no matter the odds. He did not know that Captain Daniel Cruz had figured out how to weaponize the mining lasers on cargo ships, turning them into weapons that could cut through starship hulls. He did not know that Lieutenant Amy Ross had developed attack patterns based on ancient human cavalry tactics, adapted for the three-dimensional battlefield of space. He did not know that humanity was preparing to give him the fight of his life. On the 28th day after the message arrived, Admiral Torres addressed the people of Earth. His face appeared on every screen, in every language, reaching every corner of the planet. "They are coming," he said. "They think we will be easy prey. They think we will break. They think we will surrender." He paused and looked directly into the camera. "They are wrong. We are humanity. We have faced extinction before, and we are still here. Tomorrow, we will face it again, and we will still be here when it's over. Together, we will show these invaders what happens when you threaten our home." The next day, the Velthary fleet entered the solar system. The war had begun. The Velthary Third Conquest Fleet emerged from hyperspace near the orbit of Jupiter, their massive warships casting shadows across the gas giant's swirling storms. 200 vessels, each one designed for destruction, each one crewed by warriors who had never known defeat. Fleetmaster Rin stood on the command deck of the flagship and activated the long-range sensors. Expecting to see a helpless world waiting to be conquered, what he saw made his blood run cold. 300 human vessels waited in formation between Jupiter and the inner planets. They were strange ships, clearly converted from civilian designs, bristling with weapons that should not have existed. Mining platforms had become battle stations. Cargo freighters had become cruisers. At the center of the formation floated the Defiance, humanity's first true warship, broadcasting a message on every frequency. You were warned. Rin's hands trembled as he opened a channel to High Commander Zithos aboard the command ship. "They have a fleet," he reported, his voice barely steady. "A combat fleet. This is not possible. Our intelligence said they had no warships." "Calm yourself," Zithos replied, though there was uncertainty in his tone. "They are still primitive. Their technology cannot match ours. Proceed with the attack." Aboard the Defiance, Admiral Kevin Torres stood on the bridge surrounded by his command staff. Grace Mitchell monitored enemy communications from her station. Lieutenant Amy Ross coordinated the fighter squadrons. Captain Daniel Cruz handled engineering and damage control. They had trained for this moment for weeks, but nothing could truly prepare them for the reality of facing an alien armada. "They're moving into attack formation," Grace reported. "It looks like a standard wedge pattern. They're going to try to punch through our center." Torres nodded slowly. The aliens were confident, predictable. That was good. "All ships hold position. Let them come to us. Fighter wings, prepare for launch on my command." The Velthary fleet advanced, their energy weapons powering up, their shields shimmering with protective fields. They expected the humans to break and run. They expected panic and chaos. Instead, the human fleet held steady, waiting. "They are not retreating," Rin observed with growing concern. "They should be retreating." "They are fools," Zithos declared. "Open fire." The first volley of plasma bolts streaked across the darkness of space, brilliant green against the black. Human ships twisted and rolled, dodging with an agility that surprised the Velthary gunners. Some shots connected, and a dozen human vessels exploded in balls of fire. But the rest kept coming. All ships returned fire, Torres commanded. "Fighter wings, launch." The space between the two fleets erupted into chaos. Human weapons were crude by Velthary standards, but they were effective. Railguns fired slugs of metal at incredible speeds, punching through alien armor. Modified mining lasers burned holes in enemy hulls. Missile pods emptied their payloads in waves of destruction. Lieutenant Amy Ross led the first fighter wave, her small craft weaving through the storm of weapons fire. She had spent her whole life preparing for aerial combat. Space was different, more complex, more deadly. But the principles were the same: speed, surprise, and the willingness to take risks. "Stay tight," she ordered her pilots. "Target their sensor arrays. Blind them, and they can't shoot us." Her fighters swarmed around a Velthari cruiser, their weapons focusing on the delicate equipment that protruded from its hull. Explosions rippled across the alien ship as systems failed and crew members died. The cruiser went dark, drifting helplessly. The Velthari had never faced enemies who fought like this. Their previous conquests had been against species who fought in organized formations, who retreated when outmatched, who surrendered when defeat was certain. Humans did none of these things. Captain Daniel Cruz commanded the converted mining ship Hammer. His vessel was slow and ugly, but it carried the most powerful weapon in the human fleet, a mining laser originally designed to cut through asteroids. When a Velthari carrier crossed into his firing arc, he gave the order to fire. The beam burned through the carrier's shields in seconds and continued through its hull. The massive ship broke apart, its ammunition stores detonating in a chain reaction that destroyed 2 nearby destroyers. "That's for Earth," Cruz said quietly, but the Velthari had numbers on their side, and their weapons were more advanced. Human ships were dying, their crews fighting to the last moment before their vessels came apart around them. The Defiance took a direct hit that killed 30 crew members and disabled its main weapons array. Admiral Torres refused to withdraw. "We hold the line," he ordered. "Every minute we fight is another minute for Earth to prepare." Sergeant Lucy Palmer was aboard the assault transport Fury, leading the first wave of boarding operations. Her team had trained for this in simulators, but nothing could prepare them for the reality of breaching an alien warship. "Cutting through the hull now," reported the engineer beside her. The plasma torch burned through the Velthari armor, creating an opening just large enough for a human to crawl through. Palmer went first, her weapon raised, her heart pounding. The interior of the Velthari ship was dark and cramped, designed for creatures much larger than humans. The first alien she encountered was nearly 3 meters tall, covered in scales and armed with a weapon she had never seen before. It saw her and raised its gun. Palmer was faster. She fired 3 rounds into its chest and moved past the falling body without slowing down. "Contact," she reported. They died just like anything else. Push forward. Her team fought through the ship corridor by corridor, room by room. The Velthari were bigger and stronger, but the humans were more aggressive, more willing to take risks, more comfortable with close-quarters violence. Within an hour, Palmer stood on the enemy bridge, surrounded by the bodies of the alien crew. "This ship is ours," she transmitted. "Send the tech teams. Let's see what we can learn." The battle lasted 9 hours. When it was over, 118 Velthari ships had been destroyed. 62 more had been captured or disabled. Only 20 managed to retreat into hyperspace, fleeing back to report the impossible news. The human fleet had been cut in half. 150 ships lost. Thousands of crew members dead. Admiral Torres counted the casualties and felt the weight of each name, but they had one grace. Mitchell stood beside him on the damaged bridge of the Defiance. Watching the debris field where the Velthari fleet had been, "They'll come back," she said. "With more ships, with bigger weapons." Torres nodded slowly. "I know, but now they know something too. They know we can fight. They know we can win." He turned to face her, and there was fire in his old eyes. "They thought they were coming to conquer a primitive world. Now they know the truth. They've picked a fight with the most dangerous species in the galaxy, across the solar system, on Earth and Mars, and the stations scattered through the asteroid belt. Humanity celebrated its first victory. But they also mourned their dead and prepared for what was coming. This battle was just the beginning. The Velthari Dominion would not accept defeat. They would return with everything they had, and humanity would be ready. The survivors of the Third Conquest Fleet reached the Velthari homeworld carrying news that shook the foundations of the Dominion. For the first time in 8,000 years, a conquest fleet had been defeated. For the first time in the history of their species, an enemy had stood against them and won. High Commander Zithos was brought before the Dominion Senate in chains. His failure was unprecedented, unforgivable. The sentence was death, carried out within the hour. His replacement, Supreme Commander Veth, was given a single order: destroy the humans at any cost. Veth was older than Zithos, more experienced, more cautious. He studied the reports from the Battle of Jupiter with careful attention, noting the tactics the humans had used, the weapons they had developed, the determination they had shown. Unlike his predecessor, he did not underestimate this new enemy. They are more dangerous than we believed, he told the Senate. We will need to mobilize the full strength of the Dominion to defeat them. The order went out across the Empire. Every warship, every soldier, every resource was directed toward the war effort. Species that had been conquered centuries ago were forced to contribute troops and supplies. The Velthari war machine, dormant for generations, roared back to life. On Earth, humanity prepared for what they knew was coming. The victory at Jupiter had bought them time, but it had also revealed how much they had to learn. Captured Velthari technology was studied and reverse-engineered. New weapons were designed. New ships were built. Every factory, every laboratory, every able-bodied person contributed to the war effort. Admiral Torres established forward bases on Mars and in the asteroid belt. Dr. Samuel Green continued his work on faster-than-light travel, making incremental progress that would eventually change the course of the war. Grace Mitchell was promoted to lead the intelligence division. It's analyzing enemy communications and predicting Velthari movements. The second Velthari attack came 6 months after the first. This time they brought 1,000 ships, led by Supreme Commander Veth himself. The battle for Mars lasted 3 weeks, with fighting on the surface and in orbit. Humanity held, but barely. The cost was terrible. Captain Daniel Cruz died, defending the shipyards of Phobos. His ship, the Hammer, was surrounded by 12 Velthari destroyers. Rather than surrender, he overloaded his reactor and rammed the enemy flagship, destroying it along with 3 other vessels. His sacrifice saved the evacuation fleet carrying 100,000 civilians to safety. The war spread across the solar system. Velthari raiding parties struck at human supply lines. Human commando teams attacked enemy bases and installations. Neither side could gain a decisive advantage. The fighting settled into a brutal war of attrition. In the second year, Dr. Samuel Green finally cracked the secret of faster-than-light travel. His prototype engine was unstable and dangerous, but it worked. Humanity could now reach the stars, could take the fight to the enemy. The first ships equipped with the new technology launched raids deep into Velthari territory, striking supply depots and communication relays. The raids were led by Lieutenant Amy Ross, now promoted to commander. Her tactics were bold and unconventional, mixing ancient human military strategies with the new realities of space warfare. The Velthari had never faced an enemy who appeared from nowhere, struck without warning, and vanished before reinforcements could arrive. "We're not just fighting them anymore," Ross told her pilots before one mission. "We're making them afraid. Every time they look at the stars, they'll wonder if we're coming for them. That fear is worth 100 warships." In the third year, humanity suffered its greatest loss. Admiral Kevin Torres was killed during the siege of Luna, when a Velthari dreadnought broke through the defensive line and opened fire on the command station. He had refused to evacuate, coordinating the defense until the very end. His last order was to ram the enemy ship with the damaged remains of the Defiance. Grace Mitchell took command of the fleet. She had never wanted to be a warrior, had never imagined herself giving orders that sent thousands to their deaths. But the war had changed her, hardened her. She did what had to be done. "Torres believed in us," she said at his memorial service, broadcast to every human settlement in the solar system. "He believed that we could win this war no matter the odds. We will honor his memory by proving him right." Under her leadership, humanity went on the offensive. The new fleet, equipped with faster-than-light drives and weapons developed from captured Velthari technology, pushed beyond the solar system for the first time. Colony ships followed the warships, establishing human settlements on worlds that the Velthari had claimed. The fourth year saw the heaviest fighting of the war. Sergeant Lucy Palmer, now a colonel, led Special Forces operations behind enemy lines. Her teams captured Velthari officers, destroyed research facilities, and gathered intelligence that gave humanity crucial advantages. But the war took its toll on Palmer too. She lost friends, soldiers she had trained, people she had come to love. Each death added weight to her shoulders, but she refused to stop. There would be time for grief when the war was over. "We started this," she told her troops before the assault on the Velthry forward base at Sigma Draconis. "They came to our home and tried to make us slaves. Now we're coming to theirs. And we're going to finish it." The assault was successful, but Palmer was wounded in the fighting. She died 3 days later in a field hospital, surrounded by the soldiers she had trained. Her last words were simple: "Don't stop until it's done." Dr. Nathan Park continued to develop new weapons, each one more devastating than the last. Phased torpedoes that bypassed enemy shields, gravity bombs that crushed ships into twisted metal, weapons that made the galaxy take notice of humanity's terrible creativity. The other species of the galaxy watched the war with growing fascination and fear. The Velthry had ruled them for millennia, had seemed invincible. Now these strange creatures from a small blue planet were fighting them to a standstill. Some species began to hope for the first time in generations. Others feared what would happen if humanity won. By the 5th year, the tide had turned. The Velthry were exhausted, their resources depleted, their population demoralized. Humanity had suffered terrible losses, but they kept fighting, kept building, kept pushing forward. Every time the Velthry thought they had broken the human spirit, humanity came back stronger. Grace Mitchell stood on the bridge of the Defiance II, the new flagship of the human fleet. Around her, 1,200 warships prepared for the final assault. 5 years of war had led to this moment. "We've received word from the advanced scouts," reported her communications officer. "The Velthry home system is defended by approximately 800 ships. They've pulled back everything they have left." Grace nodded slowly. 800 ships against 1,200. The Velthry still had technological advantages. But humanity had momentum, determination, and something the Velthry had never understood. They had something to fight for. "Set course for the Velthry homeworld," she ordered. "It's time to end this." The fleet moved forward, carrying the hopes and dreams of a species that had been marked for extinction. They were farmers and scientists, teachers and engineers, ordinary people who had become warriors because they had no other choice. They were human, and they would not be stopped. The human fleet emerged from hyperspace above the Velthry homeworld, like a storm breaking across the sky. 1,200 warships, each one carrying the weight of 5 years of blood and sacrifice, spread out in attack formation. At their center floated the Defiance II, flagship of Fleet Admiral Grace Mitchell. Broadcasting humanity's final message to the galaxy, the Velthry homeworld was beautiful. Blue oceans, green continents, clouds drifting across a sky that had never known invasion. For 12,000 years, this planet had been the heart of an empire that stretched across the stars. Now it faced something it had never experienced before: fear. Supreme Commander Veth stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the human fleet on his tactical display. 800 Velthry warships surrounded the homeworld, the last defenders of a civilization that had ruled the galaxy for millennia. They were outnumbered, outmaneuvered, and for the first time in their history, fighting for survival. "They actually came," he said quietly. "They crossed the galaxy to finish what we started." His second-in-command stepped forward. "Supreme Commander, we can still negotiate. Perhaps we can reach terms that preserve the Dominion." Veth shook his head slowly. "We sent them a message 6 years ago. Surrender or die. We gave them no choice, no mercy, no hope." He turned to face his subordinate. "Now they have come to give us the same choice." On the Defiance II, Grace Mitchell prepared to address the enemy fleet. Around her stood the survivors of the original command staff. Commander Amy Ross, now in charge of all fighter operations; Dr. Nathan Park, who had developed the weapons that had made human victory possible; Colonel Marcus Webb, who had taken over the Special Forces after Lucy Palmer's death. They had lost so many people to reach this moment. "Open a channel to the enemy fleet," Grace ordered. "All frequencies." The communications officer nodded. "Channel open, Admiral." Grace looked at the Velthry homeworld on the main display. Somewhere down there, millions of aliens were looking up at the sky, wondering if today would be their last day. She thought about how humanity had felt 6 years ago. The Velthri message had arrived, terrified, hopeless, certain that extinction was coming. She would not give them the same treatment. Humanity was better than that. "Oh, 6 years ago, you sent us a message," she began, her voice carrying across the void of space to every Velthri ship, every communication system, every corner of their empire. "You told us to surrender or face extinction. You gave us no choice, no negotiation, no hope for anything except slavery." She paused, letting her words sink in. "We chose to fight. We chose to resist. We chose to show you what humanity is capable of when we are pushed to the edge of oblivion." Her voice grew harder. "And now we stand at your door with the power to do to you what you plan to do to us." Across the Velthri fleet, commanders and crew members listened in silence. They had heard stories of human brutality, of the terrible things these creatures had done in the war. They expected no mercy, no quarter, no chance for survival. Grace continued. "You called us primitive. You called us weak. You thought we would break and surrender, just like the 47 species who came before us." She shook her head slowly. "You were wrong. We are the species that crawled out of mud and reached for the stars. We are the species that survived ice ages and plagues and world wars. We are the species that looked at your empire and said no." She leaned forward, her eyes fixed on the display. "Congratulations. You just challenged the most deadly civilization among the cosmos. And now you will learn what that means." The Velthri fleet began to move, forming a defensive formation around their homeworld. They expected the humans to attack immediately, to unleash the same devastating weapons that had destroyed so many of their ships during the war, but Grace did not give the order to fire. "However," she said, and her voice softened, just slightly, "we are not like you. We do not seek to conquer. We do not seek to enslave. We do not seek to destroy civilizations simply because we can." She paused. "We offer you something you never offered us. A choice." Supreme Commander Veth listened with growing disbelief. This was not what he had expected. This was not how wars ended. "Surrender your fleet and your military installations," Grace continued. "Accept responsibility for the war you started. And join us. Not as slaves, not as subjects, but as partners. Equal members of a new alliance that will bring peace to this galaxy." The silence stretched for a long moment. "And if we refuse?" Veth asked, his voice carrying across the channel. Grace's expression hardened. "Then we will do what we have to do. We do not want to destroy your civilization. But we did not travel across the galaxy to accept defeat. The choice is yours, Supreme Commander. Choose wisely." The battle for the Velthri homeworld began when a young, ambitious officer on a Velthri cruiser opened fire on a human destroyer. Within seconds, both fleets engaged, and the space around the planet erupted in fire and destruction. The fighting lasted 3 days. Human ships used their superior numbers and hard-won experience to press the attack. Commander Amy Ross led the fighter wings in strikes against enemy capital ships, weaving through defensive fire with the skill that had made her a legend. Dr. Nathan Park's weapons tore through Velthri shields like they were paper. Colonel Webb led boarding teams onto disabled enemy vessels, capturing them one by one. But the Velthri fought with the desperation of people defending their home. They knew that defeat meant the end of everything they had built over 12,000 years. They fought without retreat, without surrender, giving everything they had. Supreme Commander Veth died on the 3rd day. When his flagship was finally destroyed after holding out against 6 human warships, his last order was to continue fighting, but his death broke something in the Velthri fleet. Ship after ship began to surrender, their crews unwilling to die for a war that was already lost. By the end of the 3rd day, only a handful of Velthri vessels were still fighting. When the last gun fell silent, the dominion that had terrorized the galaxy for 12,000 years ceased to exist. Grace Mitchell looked at the Velthri homeworld. Now surrounded by the debris of battle, millions of people down there were waiting to learn their fate. The galaxy was watching, waiting to see what humanity would do with its victory. "Open a channel to the surface," she ordered. "Let them know the war is over." The weeks that followed, humanity offered the Velthari the same choice they had offered before the battle. Join the new Terran Alliance as equals, or be left alone to rebuild in peace. There would be no occupation, no slavery, no revenge. Most Velthari chose to join. They had learned the hard way what humanity was capable of. They wanted to be on the winning side. The other species of the galaxy watched in amazement. They had expected humanity to be as brutal as their former masters. Instead, they found something unexpected. A species that had fought with terrible fury, but could also show mercy. A species that had every reason to hate, but chose to build something better instead. One by one, the conquered peoples of the galaxy sent messages to Earth. They wanted to join the Alliance. They wanted to be part of whatever humanity was building. Fleet Admiral Grace Mitchell retired 6 months after the war ended. She returned to Earth and bought a small house on the coast of Maine, where she could watch the ocean and listen to the waves. She spent her days answering letters from children who had grown up during the war, who wanted to know what it was like to face impossible odds and win. Her answer was always the same. "We're human," she wrote. "It's what we do. When the universe tells us we can't win, we fight harder. When the odds are against us, we find a way. When everything seems hopeless, we keep going. Not because we're special, not because we're chosen, but because giving up is not in our nature." She would look out at the stars on clear nights, knowing that humanity was out there, spreading across the galaxy, building a future that had seemed impossible just 6 years before. The Velthari had come too. Earth expecting to find another primitive species waiting to be conquered. They had found something very different. They had found a people who would rather die than surrender, who would rather fight than kneel, who would rather burn the galaxy to ashes than accept slavery. They had found humanity, and the cosmos would never be the same.